Jill, that'll be the day that I die. This is completely spontaneous. I'm just making this up as I go along. But very interesting because that really is the essence of entrepreneurship in the big pharma space, in the tech space. That'll be the day that I die because oftentimes bad things happen. And we know that failure is essential to success. And we have a really, really unique opportunity today. This is the most important panel you're going to listen to here over these 2 days. I've convinced myself of that, and I hope our panel will convince you of that fact after the fact. Innovation today is a little bit like a three-legged stool. And the three-legged stool is one part about that magical idea, that great app, that killer device, that nanoparticle that can detect cancer. The other two legs of the stool are clinical validation. So prove to me it works. And the third is clinical validation and market access. Because your idea has to be a little bit more than just winking in the dark. You need a big player. And that three-legged stool this afternoon is going to live in the context of diabetes, which is arguably one of the most urgent and pressing clinical scenarios. So what we have today is the opportunity to look at Welldoc as sort of the prototypical digital health company, the innovator, the guys with the apps, the app that does something magical. And they engaged with two behemoth companies. One on the pharma side, J&J, and then the other one is Samsung, and that's a tech company. So to me, this is a perfect opportunity to really understand how the hell did you do it? What worked? What didn't work? Because I think that really it comes down to this notion, as I bang my head on doors of big companies, bio, life science, or tech, I often felt that line from Buddy Holly, that'll be the day that I die. Because cultures are different, the dynamics are different, the geography is different. So we're going to start off, I want you to introduce yourself and just give me that sentence about what defines your role or your company in that digital space. All right, you can start.
Sure.
Rick.
So my role within our diabetes care companies is worldwide marketing, responsibility for new product development of our digital solutions. So my team is responsible for building the surround sound around our core products, our blood glucose meters and our insulin delivery devices.
Cool. Anand?
So I'm the patient, right? I actually have type 2 diabetes, so maybe my first role is like consume it. Because for me, it's not just a professional journey, it's a personal journey that's kind of changed in many ways, right?
Define Welldoc. What, in a sentence, so I want everybody to know exactly what Welldoc is and its clinical application. I think it's very important.
So in very simplistic terms, a digital health company, but one that's taken a life sciences approach to bringing the app to market. And what does that mean in English? It means we've gone through the rigors of randomized control studies and published outcomes in peer-reviewed journals, and we've gone through the FDA for clearance. And we actually have a drug code for a piece of software. I mean, how crazy is that, right? When you start to think about pushing the boundaries and pushing the envelope, it's software as a drug. So, and it has created tremendous benefit.
Before we get to Harry, I want to ask you a question. Is big data the next wonder drug? I mean, that's a topic in of itself, right? But
is it big data, or is it just, I always say the blockbuster drug of the 21st century is the engaged patient.
Interesting.
Get them to do what they got to do in the first place, and there's enough good stuff out there. I think big data is going to amplify that. It's going to be a multiplier effect on it. There's no question about it. But big data without patient engagement is like, okay, very interesting. You didn't get them to do what you're supposed to do, and then you fail.
So if I'm a startup, if I'm a digital health company, and I get a call from this company called Samsung, I don't know if I'd even answer it. I'd be nervous.
Well, half the calls in from Samsung would probably be in Korean, so it'd be a little bit difficult for a non-technical.
All right.
So Harry Kim, I'm happy to be here, born and raised in the Bay Area. I find myself last 18 months in South Korea, sort of the epicenter of Samsung sort of culture management. Samsung, as everyone knows, is a very consumer-oriented company, and I think that's sort of the fundamental shift that we're seeing is we call ourselves sometimes patients, but at the end of the day, we're all consumers. So how do we bring a consumer experience to the patient? And to us, that's about simplifying all the complexity we deal with in the industry. We have BGMs and CGMs and data and medical devices and apps and all of these sorts of things, which are valuable and interesting in and of itself. But the question is, how do you merge all of that to simplify an experience for us as a consumer? We happen to be patients at times. And, we hear this cell phone addict thing, right? And that's sort of a real sort of construct. People are looking at their devices something like 70, 80 times a day. Those are 70 to 80 engagement points, right, of someone who is dealing with a massive sort of condition or a disease. How do you bring insights during those engagements? And how do you actually create a different experience? And I think that's really the opportunity.
So, consumer-centric marketing, consumer-centric company, right? What about J&J? What about the diabetes business? Would you say it's consumer-centric?
Completely.
Different than, let's say, Janssen or some of the other more drug-focused companies?
I think it's certainly more consumer-driven because consumer has more choice. Maybe not necessarily on their first device, but certainly on subsequent devices. You see it all around. And so it's incumbent upon us to really understand the consumer journey. We've done an extraordinary amount of work to understand all the way from awareness, acquisition, onboarding, all the way through to advocacy, not only the functional, but all the emotional touch points. And that's why, to Anand's point, the notion of behavior change, you can have all the great data in the world, but if you don't have any insight, one of the things that has impressed us about Welldoc is the actual ability to drive behavior change. And that's unique, sustained behavior change.
So our challenge today is to look at Welldoc in the context of what you did with Samsung, as you said, A to B, and then what you did with J&J, A to C, because I want to see how different it was and what the obstacles are, what some of the issues were. So why don't we talk about the Johnson & Johnson experience? First of all, and again, I want this to be from an entrepreneurial perspective. A lot of people who are startups, people looking, kind of driving and building business. What was your first date like, and where was it?
We've actually been talking for a while, right?
We've been dating for a long time.
Yeah, a very long time.
Yeah.
But in many ways, I think that's okay. That's okay because in many ways the market has caught up. The market is catching up. People are catching up. The healthcare system is catching up to this concept. I still remember when we first met, God knows how many years ago, even before you were at J&J, right?
2009.
2009?
Yeah.
People would say mHealth. What the hell is mHealth, right?
Yeah.
Or what's the hell is digital health, right? And so now, even though we've been chatting for a while, I think what we're really focused on and why I think we're successful is, you and I talked about it earlier on, step out of the muck. Forget about Samsung, forget about J&J, forget about Welldoc. What's happening is you have this ball that's moving, and it's got a big mass. It's called healthcare. But it's moving with this velocity, V1, little v1, okay, because healthcare tends to move a little slower.
I love physics.
Okay?
So,
Yeah, I know you're a physics guy. And then you got this other ball that's moving with the big mass consumerism. It's moving with the big velocity, right? And they're on this collision course. And if we're smart, what we'll do is we'll take advantage of what happens at that collision. We'll take advantage of the energy that we create at that collision. To do what? To transform outcomes, increase engagement, cut costs.
In 2009, when you started talking, was Welldoc formed? Was it a platform? Did it exist?
Yeah.
So it's been around for a while.
Yeah, but see, the platform needs validity. The platform needs real use. What happens in a randomized control study?
Well, you needed clinical validation, which was my first point. But was technology up to speed? Were the apps? Where was the smartphone engagement then?
Think about it, guys. When
2007, right?
When we built our very first one, the word app didn't exist in the vernacular of the English language, right? And the phone was what? It was a Nokia 6600, where you had to press the 3 key 4 times to get the letter F, right? That's what we started on, right? Right?
So what convinced J&J to do this? I mean, it seems to me it was just too much work. It was too hard.
We actually participated, I think, in an early trial. We supported Welldoc with product in an early trial, and that was really the first proof point. But I think what really tipped things over the edge was an understanding from within our company that digital and patient engagement was more than just a value add. It was necessary, and in fact, if you talk to anybody about our strategic plan, you'll see that patient engagement, improved outcomes, creating value for patient, healthcare professional, and payer. It's part of our strategic plan, and doing so with strategic partners because we know we can't do it ourselves.
So I want to unpack that a little bit because I'm a digital health startup, right? I'm looking for, I want to bag the elephant, as they said in Wall Street. I'm looking for big pharma. I'm looking for a big tech company. It seems like you found a company that was enlightened, that was looking for a service that you provided. In other words, J&J, they were looking for opportunities.
Well, I think it's both ways.
Okay.
I think we were certainly looking for, Welldoc, we were looking for scalability. We were looking for scalability in a manner and in a brand, if you would, that is associated with trust. At the end of the day, people are going to use these things if they trust them. You can trust a published literature that says my A1C is this and this, but there's a certain trust factor that comes on the healthcare side with a brand like Johnson & Johnson, right? It is what it is. At the same time, we're looking for scalability that Harry said it's spot on. We're people. Behind the patient, we're a person. And when you think about what don't you do on your cell phone today, right? I don't know about anybody else, but I do everything on my cell phone. And Ed Zander, way back when Motorola, Ed Zander used to use the words seamless mobility. And for him, seamless mobility was technology A talks to B and A talks to C. And we're like, nah. Seamless mobility is this. It's you used to go to the ATM to get cash. You used to go to the doctor to get your blood glucose results. You used to go to the travel agent you used to go to X. Well, seamless mobility says X comes to you because you're now with this device, with this connectivity and the processing power and the user experience, everything comes to you. I think in many ways, to answer your question, in many ways, I think whilst we were looking for scalability on the clinical side and on the consumer side, I think they were looking for how do you provide, if you would, a holistic experience for patients.
I'm still looking for the secret sauce, right? I want to know the secrets that people can walk away from this session and say, so that's how I got into J&J. And we're going to talk about that on Samsung too. So it was a process. It took a while. Was their technology immediately available? Did you evolve your technology to the needs of J&J for their trial or for their disease management?
We have to make sure that our application is able to talk to the same APIs and the same, both when you think about integration of Samsung's S Health platform and you think about Johnson & Johnson's the whole VarioFlex and OTR platform, there is product enhancement that you have to make, sure.
So who are you talking to? If you go to a client, are you talking to the director of innovation? Are you talking to a brand manager? Are you talking to a director of marketing? Where do you go? How do you penetrate that corporate structure?
You have to go to multiple places. You have to go to multiple places. You have to go to the R&D guys because you have to understand what we just talked about. You have to go to the strategy guys because you have to see that this
in
fits
some
into the
sequence or not?
Better to be lucky than to be smart. I think if we could actually play back, maybe there is a sequence. Maybe there is a sequence that logic would say you start at the strategy and you work down.
Did you need an ally on the inside? Did you need a champion who said, listen, I like what you're doing? Was that helpful?
Without question. Well, you guys should talk about that.
And that's why I want to get to that, because I think it's important to recognize that luck is important, but to be able to penetrate a company to get digital health business in tech or life science, if you can find that ally, that may be the single biggest thing you can do. I don't know, I'm just very curious, if that was the case. Tell me about the relationship with Samsung and how you guys, and your first date, your proverbial first date.
So you got to sort of look at it from a Samsung and how we see the marketplace. I think that gives construct to where and how this marriage may or may not work. Okay, so first we say to ourselves, yes, we're a device company, but our devices are becoming increasingly smart about your lifestyle, right? We know where you are. We know we have sensors on the devices. Pretty soon you'll see a whole portfolio of sensors that can sniff the air, that can understand the environmental, the pollutants, and all of a sudden it's this convergence place. So we understand we take a position on lifestyle, right? And that means a whole bunch. And then we look at the market and say 8-9% of our users, our consumers, struggle with this disease called type 2 diabetes. Don't we have to take a position to support them? What does it look like? So when you think about, okay, there's a lifestyle component that we have a position on. There is a massive consumer base of ours that struggle with this disease. We actually, as much as Welldoc came to us, we are actually hunting in the marketplace.
Interesting.
Right? So we scanned the marketplace and said, of all the chronic conditions out there, which condition do we believe is the one that we should take a position on? And type 2 diabetes, because largely it's a lifestyle disease, Made perfect sense for us. Okay, so we look at it from a medical device perspective. This world of applications became really an important idea. Who knew that your type 2 diabetes is dictated by, 10% of that is dictated by your sleep, right? And all of a sudden, your device tells you how much sleep you are and how the quality of your sleep. You can start to converge your sleep, your diet, your fitness. You can start to converge that with applications to start giving you much better insights. So that's really where this idea came from around these ingredients. So as much as Welldoc came to us, we were looking in the industry, and we continue to look in the industry, and we have a number of partnerships in this area, but this one's quite fruitful for us because this is sort of tailor-made to bring these different ingredients together. Combine that with J&J when you have a medical-grade sort of device and sensor and output to an application that gives you insights that's personalized, to this idea of bringing your lifestyle condition and wrapping that around an individual. That's really where, number one, this was about a value proposition, and two, it's about finding the right ingredients.
It sounds a little bit like it was a bit of an arranged marriage.
A little bit.
That was this, you know, it was needs on both sides of the equation. How many people in the audience would say that they have a good working knowledge of what Welldoc does or is? Raise your hands. Interesting. So maybe 7 or 8 people.
You have an opportunity.
This is a perfect opportunity. Because the more I read about Welldoc, the more I was impressed that I'm not a big fan of a lot of these apps that use nudge psychology and tell you to take your pill, and I get very disenchanted with that personally. But your success is very, very compelling. So give us that kind of, that top line, what it is and what the outcomes are that you received. And then I want to go and talk about it in the context of both big companies.
Yeah. So New England Journal of Medicine, September 2011, I still remember the edition. Non-contextual, machine-generated, i.e. text messages or emails or whatever, that remind you to take a pill, don't work, right? If it were that simple, you would have shipped alarm clocks with all your drugs 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
That's not why people don't take what they're supposed to take. And in many ways, when you look at Welldoc, and Blue Star, the product, think of it in 2 very simplistic pieces. There's one piece which is the patient coach. A patient puts in data, but they get back feedback. They get feedback that's tailored to them at that point in time, telling them what to do. And of course, what they do, what I do, versus what Harry does may be different because we may be on different medication regimens.
And this is a class 2 medical
class 2
device?
yeah, class 2
and that's
medical
important.
device.
Could you explain, because that's important.
I'm going to come to that. So you put in a value, and there's only 4 types of values you can put in. You can put in metabolic values, like your glucose, your weight, things you can measure. You can put in your medications, right? Whatever the medication is, orals, insulins, combos, things like that. You can put in your psychosocial and your symptoms. How am I feeling? Okay. You can put in your lifestyle parameters, diet, exercise, sleep, all the things that Harry said. And you get not just personalized coaching on what to do then and there, but you get longitudinal feedback on what to do over time. So that's, if you would, the part that faces off to the patient. Inherent in that, John, is a certain risk profile. So the FDA looks at risk in 2 dimensions, right? They look at probability of risk and they look at severity of that risk, and it's the product of the 2 that calculates risk. So they look at the radial component of risk, and the further out you go, you start to move into class 2, class 3 world, and kind of where we ended up with our use cases was somewhere in that class 2 region, so that's kind of why we went there.
And that's because class 1 unregulated, right?
No, class 1 still
class one's
regulated.
Regulated, the other way around, class 3, right.
Class 1 is enforcement discretion.
So because you took data and provided therapeutic recommendation, is that?
Yes and no.
Okay, because that's always complicated.
Yes and no. So I'll come to that.
Okay.
So go back to finish the second half. So the first half's the patient coach. The second half is what the provider sees. So can you imagine doctors back when, and they said, does that mean every blood glucose reading is going to be SMS to me and I'm going to be woken up by my 10,000 patients? I don't want that. Forget about, you can imagine watching a Law and Order show. Or, did you know that you got a text at 3:30 in the morning that that's not going to fly. So doctor said, hey, can the system actually take all that data and extract what you said? It's not the data, but it's information, knowledge. It's patterns. And can it extract, and if there's things I need to know about as a physician, tell me so that the next time I see the patient, we can make the necessary adjustments and put them on the right trajectory. So think of Welldoc and think of Blue Star, the platform, as doing those 2 things: patient coaching and then physician clinical decision support, as Rick said. So now coming back to this regulatory conundrum.
Yep.
when we first approached the FDA, the mobile medical guidance document didn't exist.
Yeah.
Okay. Bakul Patel and Jeff Shuren at the FDA didn't exist. And we said, well, listen, there's actually a couple of rules that already existed. One of them was the accessory rule. We were taking data from a predicate medical device and consuming it. And the second one was you're treating, mitigating, diagnosing a disease. We said, you know what, we kind of fit underneath that class 2 standard definition. As it turns out, as Rick alluded to, the FDA is actually, kudos to them. You know, how many times have we gone to Capitol Hill and they testify for all these innovation committees and whatnot, and they're like, oh, the FDA is getting in the way of innovation. They've actually done a great job of catching up.
I agree.
They're still a little bit behind, but there's this new category called enforcement discretion.
Right.
Where
It's just a big gray zone.
A little bit gray, but they put the onus on you to say, you figure out and you tell us what that risk profile is, and if you're showing us with reasonable test cases that you're not harming a patient, well then, go at it, right? So that's the pathway we took. We ended up looking at our risk and saying that's
So
how
tell
we
me the magic, because your data are truly amazing. And I want the audience to get a sense of Welldoc and the success that you're moving along with.
So there's a number in diabetes, for those of you who know, some of you may not know, called A1C. And in simple English, it's the amount of sugar in your blood, right? Measured over a 3-month average, a volumetric average. The target is established by the American Diabetes Association is it should be 7% or less. A person who doesn't have diabetes, by the way, that number is 5.5%, which in English kind of means 5.5% of your total blood volume is sugar. Now, the reason that number should be 7% or less is as follows. Every 1 point delta from 7 to 8, 8 to 9 represents a 42% increase in the risk of heart attacks, kidney failure, blindness, amputation, stroke. A drug is heralded by the FDA if it drops that number by a half. That's the marker that they use.
That's a benchmark for approval for new anti-oral hypoglycemics.
A half, right?
Yeah.
In our clinical trials, we were seeing a 2-point reduction. The people say, are they swallowing the phone? We said, no, they're doing what they're supposed to do. They're following their instructions.
Hold on. Hold that thought right there, because I want to go, that's unbelievable, right? I mean, when you look at multi-billion-dollar clinical trials that are looking at a 1% or half a point reduction in glycosylated hemoglobin, that's amazing. Full stop.
Yep.
Give me the J&J perspective. So you saw that. You see that data. Do you believe it?
Absolutely. Well, there's two things that were really impressive and are really impressive about what Welldoc is doing. One is the clinical results, and the beauty of the data that Welldoc and Anand are gathering and continue to gather is that data continues to support the outcomes. So it's not just that they're showing it in clinical trials over a defined period of time in a very tightly controlled environment. They're seeing it in real world. So the other piece that is really attractive to J&J, aside from the robust clinicals, because we're a conservative, large multinational company, the other piece that's really attractive is that with every single action that I take in Blue Star, there's a reaction. So
For the patient and the clinician, or?
Not the clinician. The app will give me a response to everything that I do. It's engaging me.
So Amir, is the app algorithmic? Is it AI? How do you describe it in today's mumbo jumbo world?
To a purist, it's a discrete combinatorial state vector machine.
Nice.
Okay.
That's what it is for the engineers in the crowd. That's what it is. Diabetes, we're lucky, and Harry, you should talk about extending that state vector machine as you start to think about IoT sensors. So I'm going to pass it over to Harry in a second. As you think about diabetes is a discrete disease. So there's certain things that you can count on several fingers, but it's blood glucose ranges, it's the medication regimen that you're on, it's the time of the day, it's the type of reading, is it before a meal or after a meal, things like that, right? It's what are you seeking? BJ Fogg at Stanford will say, am I seeking affirmation, confirmation, validation, education, et cetera. So when you take the permutations of all of these things, what we've built is an expert system that manages those permutations, that manages the permutations not just at time t, but it takes into account what happened before, and then it takes into account what's going to happen, and that's how it presents.
So was the 2% reduction, the 2-point reduction in HbA1c independent of drug? Were there some patients not on drug?
No, everybody, if I'm not mistaken, I should check, but I'm pretty sure everybody was on some kind of, there's some kind of medication. Yeah.
And do you integrate other applications? Let's say they lose it as sort of a weight loss application. Do you work with them?
I'm going to pass this one to Harry.
Go ahead.
That's the brilliance of what
Because I want
Samsung
to
is
talk
working
about
on.
expanding the technology.
Go there now,
and really
yeah.
looking at building out this robust platform that,
So-
with optical sensors and all sorts of cool
Go there
things.
now, yeah.
So I think the results, right, were quite astounding. It was really back to this comment of how do you engage a consumer? How do you engage a consumer with their disease, not 5 minutes a month with their doctor who is fudging results around their condition, but how do you engage a consumer all the time around their condition? So the results is really the impact of engaging the consumer with real-time feedback to give them better decision support about how they manage their life. So that is the power of the application. Expanding this application, right? Expanding it to understand your lifestyle, your sleep, your diet. These are the other vectors. These are the other variables. And if you can imagine, there's probably 10,000 sort of individual responses that the application can drive. By increasing the number of factors or the number of variables that are personalized to your behaviors, your everyday decisions, all of a sudden your ability to personalize it and engage the consumer and empower them grows exponentially. So that is really the opportunity, is if we've seen a 2-point A1C reduction with this level of engagement, imagine that you understand intimately what you're eating, where you're going, what you should be eating, all of these other patterns start to drive a next level of engagement. So I think the value, and we got to figure out, is how do we unlock it from a prescription grade approach to directly to the consumers, right? And that's some of Samsung's aspirations and intent is, okay, we can prove it in a clinical setting. We can improve it to those that have this disease and are struggling and are maybe uncontrolled. And by the way, the economics are pretty unreal. If you drop your A1C by 1.5 points, you're going from roughly a $12,000 per year in terms of your total healthcare cost down to about $4,000. So you got $8,000 of real cost savings per individual that goes through
That's
this.
amazing.
It's
Was there a
amazing.
concomitant weight loss when you get something down 1.5 to 2 in this patient population?
So the answer is yes. In some cases you have weight loss. In some cases you have blood pressure improvement.
Yeah.
In some cases you have a hyperlipidemia improvement, right? So cholesterol improvement. And it's interesting, there's actually a number of published studies that show when you actually drop your HbA1c by 1 point, what it does in terms of because nobody dies from high sugar, right? They die
Right.
from the complications
Right.
of right? So
Okay.
yes, the answer is yes.
So Harry, who surprised who more? Because, and I want to look at Samsung in particular, because you have compelling clinical data. You have something that works. Yet Samsung has amazing technology that maybe you didn't think of, or vice versa. Help me understand that dynamic of
So Anand and I always talk about this idea of crawl, walk, run, right? And this idea of crawl, walk, run is you have an app, we have a phone. Okay, put them together, we're crawling, and we're sort of bringing something to the marketplace. So you start to walk when you start to say, what can I do today with your application and our sensors and our data? Then you start to say, geez, we can start to get after this in a slightly different way. Then you get to this run component, what we affectionately call 1 + 1 = 3. And that's sort of this idea of what's different, what are the new use cases because of this? And we start to sort of open the kimono a little bit and say, here's where we're going with our sensors. Here's where we're going with wearables. Here's where we're going with IoT. Here's where we're going when you can start to bring diabetes management into your home, to the people who love you and the people who want to care for you. Here's what you can do when you start to have a better understanding of your biometrics and your environment. All of a sudden, you're 1 + 1 = 3, and bringing and simplifying that. And I think that's the key thing is we have to run towards simplifying the experience. We have, and I'm sure downstairs, and I'm sure when you go to HIMSS and other places, you can walk half a mile, see 1,000 point solutions. The question of those point solutions, and we live in pilot-itis hell, right?
Yeah.
That is healthcare in a nutshell, is pilot-itis hell. The question is, how do you bring this at scale? And really, this is about simplifying all of those point pieces into an experience that the consumers love. And diabetics don't want to advertise that they're diabetics. They don't want to have a reader and a strip and a pump and a this. They don't want to have discrete pieces of either technology or data.
Yep.
They want an experience either down to their wrist or down to their phone to help manage this condition.
So, Anand, I know you're chomping at the bit to say something, but I want you to answer the question about, were you surprised by some technology? When that kimono became a little opened.
No, I wasn't surprised at all because I'm a wireless guy and these guys
Okay.
are my clients, God knows when I was at PRTM. But no, let's bring what Harry said to life though. It's really
Okay.
important, guys. 1 + 1 = 3. Real example, okay? Patient goes out, they eat a couple of slices of pizza at lunch, they measure their postprandial sugar, it's 290, okay? It should be between 130 and 170 2 hours after lunch, okay? That's 290. Blue Star, in its normal modality, would tell the patient against their medication regimen, do XYZ with your meds, okay, drink water, whatever. Okay? These are standard algorithmic things that you do that if you had a doctor in your pocket, they would say do XYZ. All of a sudden now, though, you have a phone, and you have a phone that has an accelerometer and a pedometer that's calculating your steps. And in fact, you've been watching the data for this patient, and you're like, this is like the 10th time this has happened, okay? But the data in the background says every time this patient or person has walked 1,500 steps, whatever the number is, there's a BG transfer function on activity that says, every time you walk 1,500 steps, your BG comes down by 48 mg per deciliter. Hey, now you got a choice. Hey, you can take that insulin pen, whip it out, and give yourself a little squirt, or hey, it's a really nice day outside and I've already got a GPS plot of where you can walk. Why don't you go and walk your extra 1,500 steps? And at the end of the day, patients want choice. They always want choice, right? They want choice that makes sense for them against the profile that they set. Because if you tell a person who doesn't exercise, you go and take the steps, you'll lost them. In that case, they should take the squirt and then over. But we could never have done that if we don't have access to those registers.
John, let me just take a scenario one step further. Imagine the phone now understands where you are. And now the phone understands what your habits are. And all of a sudden, the phone understands that you're about to walk into a restaurant, and this restaurant is Chili's or whatever it happens to be. In 2017, all restaurants will have their nutrition values loaded so that you can actually tag and you can actually access them. So now you walk into a restaurant and it knows where you are, and it knows that there's a certain menu, and it knows there's a nutrition content. And what if it understood your medication and how much you've walked and all of that, and now it's all of a sudden recommending to you what you should be eating, like what would be good for you if you're going to make a choice, right? Which is the best choice for you? So now you get to this idea of, okay, I have measurements, and now I have location awareness, now I can get after nutrition because I understand where I'm at. Now you're starting to really drive this experience in a way that says, I'm with you, right? And I'm here to help you through. At the end of the day, it's your decision. And imagine that all of those choices and all of that insight is provided to your loved ones. And it can be your mom, it can be your children, it can be your grandparents, whoever they happen to be. And there's nothing more important than in behavior change than getting the people who love you to understand and see it, because ultimately we're accountable to our loved ones for taking care of ourselves. And for them to see it and for them to engage and for them to be able to weigh in, really, really powerful constructs. So this is really that 1 + 1 = 3 of what we can do with the building blocks that you sort of see represented up here. And that's why we're super excited around what this, again, 1 + 1 = 3 can represent.
So certainly there's an element of collaborative care. You're collaborating in your own care. That's important. Is there an element of gamification? It's kind of a hot buzz name. Where does that fit into you guys and using Welldoc and driving compliance and utilization?
I think gamification is, I don't know if I would say gamification, but I would say personalization, making it real for whoever I am. We've got, there's an asset that we have within J&J called the Human Performance Institute, Health and Wellness. It's all about behavior science. And it's understanding what motivates me and the triggers that will cause me to change my behavior to achieve a new habit. It may be gamification, but I think it's really more Uber engagement.
Interesting. So diabetes seems to be the perfect disease for what you're doing, just because of the active role the patient plays and all the dynamics. Have you been thinking about translating this to other categories? You can say you don't want to talk about it if you don't want to, but where do we go next in terms of moving to other diseases and other issues?
Well, certainly for J&J.
How could you not, right?
I mean,
how could you not?
I mean, it's an easy model. Easy. It's a good model to transfer to other, not just other chronic diseases, but pre-diabetes, type 1 diabetes, most certainly, gestational diabetes. So these are really serious
So you're expanding
problems.
the diabetes marketplace, but go outside of diabetes.
Sure.
What
So
categories?
Cardiovascular disease, so CHF, which is a poster child for
very interesting.
rehospitalization cost reductions, is a huge area. Mental disease. There was a panel this morning that talked about mental disease and a lot of analogies between what we're talking about up here and what I heard this morning. So there's no question that this is transferable.
I think just building off what Rick said, I think the fun part about this journey is right, wrong, or indifferent, we've built a platform. And the platform collects 4 types of inputs. As you said, they're metabolic inputs. In our case, it's BG, right? In asthma, it's spirometry. In ovarian cancer, it's CA125. Right? It's whatever the number is you're measuring, right? You then put in your meds, the second vector. The third one is lifestyle, and then the fourth one is the symptomology. And so I think the triangle of death, as I call it, right? You have diabetes sitting in the middle of 3 vertices. One is obesity, one's hypertension, and one's high cholesterol. But if we can just solve that, folks, that's a big chunk, a massive chunk, okay? It's a massive chunk of our healthcare spend, and quite frankly, I'll say this as a patient because I see it sitting in my doctor's office all the time. The worst part about having a chronic disease, guys, is loneliness, okay? And people feel lonely, they feel detached, okay? And if you're lonely, it's this spiral, this abyss of misery is the honest truth. It just goes down and there's no escape. But if technology can be something that helps provide, if you would, a community, that provides engagement, that gives them hope, right? Then you reverse that. And I think in many ways, it's not just the diseases. I mean, as you talked about mental health, I mean, it's huge.
So,
this can go in a lot of places, right?
Harry, everywhere I look, I see more things becoming connected or included into the smartphone. Now we have an ultrasound probe that you plug in and you can, Philips, and you can do ultrasound on your smartphone. Where is technology going? Can you tease us along that, where it may be other therapeutic areas that might be coming out of this?
Yeah, so let me zoom the lens back just for half a second. At the end of the day, if we want to make a difference in healthcare, because healthcare largely today is sick care, right? And that sick care is really around chronic diseases where your outcomes don't really improve, but you can maybe manage them better. Diabetes, you have a shot at sort of reversing some of those pieces. But if you think about, ultimately, this is about driving better outcomes, this is about driving better wellness. There's really just 4 things that we've got to figure out how we bring together. One is your lifestyle, which arguably is 50% of your total, drives 50% of your outcome or your condition. The second one is the care that you receive, right? And bringing the care from a doctor to an application with the best practices is a huge advantage. But that realistically is 10-20% of your condition is medical care. Then you got new domains that we're looking at really, really importantly, environmental and genetics, right? So you have 4 distinct different domains, data domains. So one, we have emerging industries around all 4 of those areas. The question is, how do you bring and converge that around an individual? And how do you make sense of that around an individual? So you asked whether the next frontier is around analytics. In many respects, that it is. And if you can personalize those 4 things, and if you can drive analytics that are personalized to the individual, you have an unbelievable shot at sort of turning the pyramid on its head, right? This doesn't bend the cost curve, this sort of breaks the cost curve. It sort of breaks the outcomes. And that really, it's scary in many respects because it gets down to the individual and it really empowers them. So I think in many respects, we are looking at how do we drive better understanding of our lifestyle, of the environment, of bringing clinical care, clinical domain, as well as our understanding of genetics.
Interesting. All right, I just want to We've got about 5 minutes left in the session, so if there are questions, I'd like to take a few questions. But I want to talk a little bit about our headline, Collaborate to Transform. I think we've talked a lot about transformation, but I want to talk about collaboration. Little company, big company. Little company, global, based not in the United States. So what are some lessons learned? And I want to go 1, 2, 3. Lessons learned about when you're working in a collaborative environment with a digital health, I'm reluctant to use the word startup, but startup. How do you do it? Did it go well? What were some of the points of success and stumbling points from your perspective?
I think it is going well. Stumbling blocks, get the right people involved early on is absolutely critical. Invest the time up front for the opening of the kimono, the rolling up of the sleeves, and really understanding what your intent is.
Do you become friends? I mean, I hate to ask such a mundane question, but you guys work together. Do you have to get along? I mean, is it a social component? I'm serious about that. I know you guys are like backslapping, but to me that's an insight.
You need to get along. You need to be of like mind. You're spending so much time together that you absolutely have to have the same values. Is it that innovator vibe
that kind of comes out? Is it that?
I think that's critical.
I think it's doing something really, really important.
That's interesting.
Is a driver.
We're on a personal journey together, every one of us, and it's not just what we do in our meetings. I think, to Rick's point, it's really important. Some people will get caught up in partnerships of trying to define every last T and every I at time T0. You can't do that. It's not possible. So I think we know where true north is. We know where we're headed.
So shared goals.
But we're very adamant about making sure we have very clear instructions on what happens in the next 30, 60 days.
Yeah.
And we have very defined success measures for that 30, 60-day period. That's really important. That was really important as we phased our relationship with Samsung. But we know we were headed that way. Don't try to engineer the final state, because you're probably going to be wrong today. You're probably going to be wrong.
So let's go to South Korea and the nature of that relationship, even though Samsung is well entrenched in the United States.
Yes.
How did that go? Is that
There are times where you have the big Samsung who is quarterly driven, device driven, hardware driven. And then there's parts of Samsung that say we have to go chase, how do we drive meaningful value? And there is a internal, I think, tension point all the times. And every large company will deal with this. And for us, this is about how do we connect doing good with doing well. So if we just sort of say, yes, the volumes and the revenue will come, but first and foremost, we have to chase the outcome, right? If we do not chase the outcome, and you can get after a big deal and get a lot of devices and software and other pieces, but you got to chase the outcome. So one, that's most important, is to anchor around measurable outcomes that we can prove to ourselves and to the industry. Two, you have to build trust. This is where you have to get brutally honest, brutally authentic. What works? What do you want to do? What do we want to do? And some things just get thrown off the table, right? Because we have to align those pieces together. It is not easy. Sort of this elephant and ant in many ways dancing.
Exactly.
Not to say they're an ant, but in terms of resources and stuff, they're quite small compared to hundreds of thousands of people. I come from a digital city where there are 36,000 employees, most of them engineers, living and breathing, sensors, UX, devices, hardware, software, and at scale, they're trying to figure out how do we build the next 100 million plus sort of unit capabilities. That is not an easy dance. So you do need to find the right partnerships. You need to find the right sponsors. And I know this question, we talked about this earlier, there's probably lots of folks out here who say they talk to Samsung in different respects in different places. Who you engage in the company is really important. You can spend 6 months chasing in the wrong organization and be really, really frustrated. I have more partners that are frustrated dealing with us than I am happy dealing with us, because there's just many facets to it. So I'll put it on the table. My email address is quite simple, harold.kim, Harold.kim. And if I can help,
Okay.
I'm not allowed to do that.
No, of course you can.
Someone says I'm in trouble. And I know, yes. But it is important, as partners, this is how we create value. Samsung will not go on this journey in healthcare alone. Impossible, not going to happen. We have got to find the right sponsors and relationships to go build value together. If I can help direct some of that, I absolutely will.
Thank you. Good. I think that we're wrapping. We are down to 10 more seconds. All right.
You know, with the passing of Muhammad Ali, the CNN ticker had all these quotes, his famous quotes, right? And there were so many that were interesting, but the one that stuck out to me as it relates to this is one of his quotes was, "Don't count the days, but make the days count." And in so many ways, that is what we do. It's a take every day, and the value you generate, the meeting you have, the success you generate, the new experience you come up with. Hey, we cut it down from 11 screens to 3 screens. Wow. And you celebrate that kind of stuff, and I think that's really important. That's a really important guiding principle, right?
Absolutely.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much.
Fantastic.
Thank you.